Hey, this is Vu, and today I'm going to take a look at mid on Mirage. Now, primarily I'm going to be focused on the window player here. However, you do need good coordination between window, cat, and connector to have an effective mid hold, and that's really what you want whenever you can do it. So the first thing to realize is if they'll allow it, you want to make sure that you're actually just opping towards window if they're not pressuring middle. If you have a good spawn, you immediately run into window and you jump on the horse here to get the peek off. Or if you have a bad spawn, you can have your A player toss a flash over middle like that. To allow you to peek a little bit later. Now you might get baited into peeking, even with a bad spawn. However, if your opponents have a good spawn and they peek mid with an op, they're gonna beat you there if you have a bad spawn. So don't get lazy. Make sure you're having a teammate throw a flash, or worst case scenario, you can throw a flash for yourself like this, or like that. Or you can throw a flash off this wall here to try and peek it yourself. But these are obviously significantly less effective than your teammate throwing it. Now, if they're allowing you to do this, you just want to be posted on top mid pretty much the entirety of the round until you're worried about underpass. Now, if they're going to come underpass, once that time comes, there's three ways to deal with it. The first one is to have early jumped out window to peek towards underpass and clear it. And then you can kind of play, peeking towards underpass for a while and not worrying too much about top mid, or, occasionally peeking towards top middle, something like this. To deal with it, because pug teams don't have a tendency to run out mid late very often. However, if you're playing against real teams, you do have to worry. This is a very puggy play, and occasionally they will, if they know that you have a tendency to jump out window, they will run out mid late trying to catch you in the middle of the open, and it will work against you if you do that too often. The other two ways, you can either have your connector player actually come out connector and cover your underpass because you're covering his top middle, which will often happen. Or you'll just have to jump spot underpass and then, peek top mid as well. So you're covering both angles, not very effectively on either, but you're getting information towards mid anyways, and that's really your goal in that situation. Now, the majority of teams you play against really aren't going to allow you to do this. They're either going to be smoking off window or they're going to be smoking off top cat. Now, if they smoke off window, it means your connector player can play more aggressively, and if they consistently smoke it off, it means sometimes you can come towards con and just peek towards top middle instead of even going window, and you need to recognize that at some point that, if they're smoking in a gimmicky, kind of abusable way, you can play off of that. So if they are smoking towards window every round, you can either molly that smoke to prevent it from landing, which is something you want to do, with consistency if they're going to continue to throw it as you one way behind their smoke, or you can go cat sometimes, or you can go con sometimes, because they're not closing off much of top middle, which means you can get a lot done from these different angles. However, assuming you're in a scenario where they smoke off top middle or smoke off top cat and you're not already in one of those positions, how you rotate out of window is pretty much the same based on either. What you're going to want to do is you're going to want to go into one of two different setups. And these are setups that you'll see the majority of pro teams in a standard round go into. So setup number one is a more early round setup where you have the opper, which is you, peeking towards bottom con here, and you have your con player either above con, kind of quick peeking, waiting to help you out, and you can also cover palace for your A player, or you have him in con, kind of hiding. The goal with this setup is to actually eventually re-pressure middle a little bit later. So after you hold this for a while, you and your con player should both have smokes, and then eventually you're going to want to, throw a smoke towards con here, and you can one-way it through, catch the guy's bottom mid, as this is pretty much a one-way, and you can start, getting information on mid. This, kind of later smoke towards the bottom of con works because your opponents have already gotten mid control, and they either go back towards a bomb site and execute it, or they try and get connector control or ladder control, which is the areas in which you can actually execute and get pressure off of your mid control. If you don't get into ladder, window, or connector, you're not actually really getting very much done with your mid control, which is why holding this angle here prevents them from coming up cat or coming into connector, and eventually re-smoking it as they're, trying to do something. You get a lot of information on middle, especially, probably your con player is the one that ends up kind of running around in con here and one-waying it. And you prevent them from doing a lot of, if they want to run up cat or if they want to go up connector and split A, you're making it very hard for them. Now, as you throw that smoke, this is when you rotate off. Now, once you rotate off, you can do a few things. One of the, kind of gimmicky things you can do is you can have your 8th player toss a flash over mid, and you and your rifler con can try and contest it at the same time. This is something you do, again, late into the round, especially if you're down a man, 4v5, to try and find something in mid, because you get full mid control, full mid information in an instant. However, if you're up a man, or, if you're already done that mid window peak and you think they might be holding it, that's when you go into the second setup. So the second setup is the more late round setup. You're going to be opping ticket booth, and it feels a little bit counterintuitive to have the window player end up ticket booth on a large number of the late round situations. However, from ticket booth, you have a good angle, good sight line on a ramp. You can also cover connector, make sure they can't run up con and they can't easily run up cat, or at least they have to be worried about it. And you have a very good situation to actually hold A while your team holds B. So if you're in this setup, you'll be, top ticket booth. Optimally, you have your A player close ramp or close on balcony, and you have a B player or 2 B players, and you have your connector player end up playing jungle, and he's just making sure that nobody's like running through connector or running through window, and he's just making sure nobody's getting pushed from behind, essentially. However, if you don't have the jungle player, you can have a cat player towards ladder room that does essentially the same thing. Just make sure you're not getting flanked here, and everything should be fine. That's the general late round scenario you'll see a lot of teams run into. Is this ticket booth opper? Because as utility goes lower and lower, this spot becomes better and better. Now, if you're playing window, and we can assume for a second that your opponents are allowing you to play window, I want to talk about, how you can rotate off of that. Now, if you're rotating towards A, the question mark is, are you pressuring into sight immediately, or are you waiting for the retake? Now, if you're going towards jungle, it used to be very standard to jump on a bench here and play behind this smoke and essentially one way. However, as times have kind of progressed, people have gotten more and more comfortable spamming through this smoke, mollying, bench, things like that, to the point where I don't even recommend going bench very often unless you're playing against, low-level players, or you've, played, you can see that they're not dealing with the bench play very well. So I would either rotate CT towards ticket booth and go for the long rotate, in which you're not necessarily helping your teammate very much, except for to maybe throw, flashes over a tri-stack, or you wait for the retake. And if you wait for the retake, all you have to do, you can kind of jump spot and make sure, try and catch someone as they run out of palace, as you can jump and see over the smoke. And then eventually you kind of do the retake where, you can just molly towards Tetris, and you can smoke towards a ramp here. And go for a retake based off of that. So the only thing I'd recommend, again, worry about going bench. It's very effective if you're playing really bad players, but more and more players are dealing with it effectively. Now, on the other side, if they're going towards B, the main question you want to ask yourself is, how or can I get out? If your teammates are still alive on B when you get to market, the best thing you can possibly do is get out and get behind sight, either to here or to empty pillar, to stay alive as long as possible. Because best case scenario, you hold the push by supporting your teammate and making sure they can't get out of apps. Worst case scenario, you want to stay alive here to allow space for your players as they rotate in through market. You're kind of, you're making it a little bit claustrophobic for your opponents because they have to worry about the spots in back sight. A lot of the time they have to push you, in which case you can get some free kills. And a lot of the time they just won't have as aggressive control of the site as they would otherwise. Or alternatively, you're also allowing your teammates space. Like I said, you're making sure that if they come out, doorway here, they're only looking forward. They don't have to look at E-box. They don't have to look at all these weird angles. They don't have to flash to jump out window here and look both directions. They're much more comfortable, and you give your team a much better chance of winning if you can rotate into B and get to the back of sight and stay alive as long as possible before the other rotates come in. Now, if you can't get out, then you just you can either opt towards Van here and catch them as they jump out, and you can kind of throw a molly to try and deal with default as they're planting, or you can spam through the side of the box here. I believe that's it, something like that, to try and catch their planter. And then you're just going to end up waiting for the retake, potentially. If they don't smoke market window, one of the best things you can actually do after they get out is catch the cross to bench, prevent them from getting to a very effective spot, and then you go from there. So Optimally, you get out, but if you can't, you just try and find picks and then go for the retake afterwards. Now, as for other things you can do towards middle, rather than just going one mid or, window at the beginning, mid is a spot where a lot of the time you want to actually be switching it up as much as possible. So you can do something like jumping out window and getting onto catwalk here and playing from up here, or, jumping down and being a little bit more safe with it. If you have a good spawn and you're not, you don't think they're going to run straight out middle, because if they do wide swing, they're probably going to get out there before you actually get onto your angle, and they'll probably kill you. So these are gimmicky plays. Now, the other thing you can do is the Astralis mid take, and I'll explain how to do this with a 124 or 128 tick smoke. Is you aim right about here, walk forward and throw, and jump throw as you hit this building here. Now, obviously, it doesn't work on 64 tick. Maybe someone in the comments can say how to throw that on 64 tick, but that smoke is going to land right about here. And from that, you have two riflers with, very good spawns that push towards top mid, and you either molly on the other side of that smoke so they can't run out, or you molly behind the boxes so if they do run past that molly, they can't get behind those boxes. Really up to you, depending on what you want to do. And you either scope on top middle, or if they smoke it, you can nade behind it or something like that. So it's up to you how you want to play that, but this is the other way to hold middle. You do the Astralis mid take with the smoke and the, nade and the double rifle push, and you fall those players back into this setup. You have one top mid looking at bottom mid. You have one con, probably you, that's looking towards top mid, or also supporting towards Palace and making sure that Palace is held for your A player, and you have a third player. A lot of the time this will be the rifler that pushed up. One of the riflers that pushed up will come over here and play this angle. A lot of the time he's going to get blind as they push out, so he's going to have to unpeak, and he can throw a molly towards underpass if he wants. And what's going to happen is you get contact. If they're coming out top mid, this guy spins around and looks top mid. The connector player spins around and looks bottom mid, and the potentially flash cat player supports the other player top mid, and you have a mid hold. So this is something that you can do, if your teammates have a good spawn, if you're playing with coordinated players that know what they're doing, you can definitely run that as well. But the main thing you want to realize as a mid player is that at this point, in this kind of evolution of the meta, you're a lot of the time not going to end up being a window player. You're going to have to rotate around. And the main thing you want to be able to do well is recognize how you should be rotating, where you should be going, and what you should do once you get there. So again, you either play towards top con, and eventually, even if you go top con, you probably end up ticket booth late round. So thanks for watching, and I hope this helped.